It was a chilly Tuesday morning, the kind where the air feels crisp and everyone seems to be rushing just a little faster. The coffee shop on the corner of Fifth Street buzzed with its usual energy, people chatting, baristas shouting out orders, and the faint hum of espresso machines filling the room. Ethan Carter stood in line, rubbing his hands together to keep them warm. He wasn't in a hurry. He never was. His mornings were simple: wake up early, take a walk, grab a latte, and head to his small studio apartment where he worked as a freelance graphic designer. As Ethan waited for his turn, he noticed someone ahead of him, a woman who looked completely out of place in the chaos of the coffee shop. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, nothing fancy, but there was something about her that caught his attention. Her posture was relaxed yet confident, like she carried herself with purpose. Her dark hair fell loosely over her shoulders, framing a face that seemed lost in thought. She didn't look like the typical corporate worker or student who frequented this spot. There was an air of mystery around her, though Ethan couldn't quite put his finger on why. When it was finally her turn at the counter, things took an unexpected turn. She reached into her bag, searching for her wallet, only to freeze mid-motion. A flicker of embarrassment crossed her face as she muttered, "Oh no," under her breath. "I'm so sorry," she said to the barista, her voice soft but clear. "I think I left my wallet at home." The barista gave her a polite smile but shook his head. "Sorry, ma'am. We can't process the order without payment." Ethan watched as she hesitated, clearly flustered. He could see the frustration building up behind her calm exterior. Without thinking twice, he stepped forward. "Hey, don't worry about it," he said, pulling out his wallet. "I've got this." She turned to look at him, surprise flashing across her features. "Are you sure?" she asked, her tone cautious but grateful. "Absolutely," Ethan replied with a grin. "It's just a cup of coffee, no big deal." After paying for her drink, Ethan introduced himself. "I'm Ethan, by the way." "Claire," she responded, offering a small smile. "Thank you." "I owe you one." "No need," Ethan said lightly. "Consider it a random act of kindness." They exchanged a few more words before parting ways, each heading off in opposite directions. To Ethan, it was a fleeting moment, a nice story to tell later. But to Claire, it meant something more. Something she couldn't quite explain. Little did either of them know, this brief encounter would ripple through their lives in ways neither could have imagined. For now, though, they went about their days as usual, unaware of the invisible thread that had begun to weave between them. Back at his apartment, Ethan settled into his routine. He fired up his laptop, sipping his latte while scrolling through emails. Clients wanted logos, flyers, social media graphics, the usual stuff. As he worked, his mind wandered back to the woman at the coffee shop. There was something intriguing about her, something that lingered in his thoughts even after they'd parted ways. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, or maybe it was the genuine gratitude in her voice when she thanked him. Whatever it was, she stuck with him longer than most strangers did. Meanwhile, Claire found herself replaying the moment too. Sitting in her sleek office high above the city, surrounded by glass walls and expensive furniture, she couldn't stop thinking about the man who had paid for her coffee. It wasn't the money, it was the gesture itself. In a world where people often judged her based on her title or wealth, Ethan had treated her like a regular person. Someone deserving of kindness, not because of who she was, but simply because she existed. For the first time in years, Claire felt a pang of curiosity about someone outside her tightly controlled circle. Who was this guy? What was his story? And why did such a small act feel so significant? That evening, as Claire sat alone in her penthouse apartment overlooking the glittering skyline, she pulled out her phone. After a quick search online, she stumbled upon Ethan's profile. His work was impressive with clean lines, bold colors, and a touch of whimsy that made his design stand out. Scrolling through his social media, she saw glimpses of his life, photos of art exhibitions, jokes shared with friends, and captions that hinted at a sense of humor she admired. But what struck her most was how normal he seemed. No pretense, no grandeur, just a guy living his life, doing what he loved. It was refreshing and oddly comforting in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. By the end of the day, Claire knew two things for certain. First, she wanted to see him again. Second, whatever happened next, she hoped it wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. Claire wasn't just any woman. Beneath her calm and unassuming exterior lay a life filled with achievements, struggles, and secrets. She was the CEO of a tech startup that had skyrocketed to success in less than a decade. Her company was one of the biggest names in the industry, known for its innovative products and cutting-edge solutions. To the outside world, Claire was a symbol of ambition, resilience, and power. But what no one knew, what she worked hard to hide, was the heavy burden she carried behind closed doors. Her journey to the top hadn't been easy. It wasn't just about late nights at the office or making tough decisions. It was about surviving loss after loss. When Claire was in her early 20s, her parents died in a car accident. They were her anchor, her support system, and their sudden absence left her adrift. The family business they had built crumbled soon after, leaving her with nothing but debt and shattered dreams. At the time, she thought her life was over. But instead of giving up, she channeled her grief into determination. She poured every ounce of energy into her studies, graduated at the top of her class, and eventually founded her own company from scratch. But success came at a cost. For years, Claire buried herself in work, pushing away emotions and relationships. Friends drifted apart, romances fizzled out, and loneliness became her constant companion. Even when her company hit milestones others only dreamed of, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The weight of running a multi-million-dollar empire weighed heavily on her shoulders, and the isolation she felt grew deeper with each passing year. That's why Ethan's kindness stood out so much. In a world where people often saw her as either a powerful executive or a walking ATM, he treated her like a human being. He didn't ask for anything in return, didn't expect favors, and didn't judge her based on appearances. For Claire, this simple act of generosity stirred something inside her, a longing for connection, for someone who could see past the polished exterior and understand the person beneath. Curiosity got the better of her. That evening, after returning home to her luxurious penthouse, Claire decided to dig a little deeper. She pulled out her laptop and typed his name into the search bar. What she found surprised her, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was refreshingly ordinary. Ethan's online presence was modest, almost humble. His portfolio showcased his design work, which ranged from sleek corporate logos to playful illustrations for local businesses. His social media feed was filled with snapshots of his daily life, pictures of art exhibits he attended, memes that made him laugh, and heartfelt messages about teaching art classes to kids on weekends. There was no pretense in how Ethan presented himself. No flashy posts about expensive vacations or networking events. Just a man living his life, doing what he loved, and sharing moments that mattered to him. Claire scrolled through his photos, noticing the warmth in his smile and the sincerity in his captions. It was clear that Ethan valued creativity, community, and authenticity, qualities that seemed rare in the fast-paced, materialistic world Claire inhabited. As she read more about him, Claire realized how different their lives were. While she spent her days in boardrooms and her nights strategizing for the future, Ethan lived in the moment. He found joy in small things, sketching in parks, experimenting with new art techniques, and connecting with people through his work. There was a lightness to his existence that Claire envied, a freedom she hadn't experienced in years, for reasons she couldn't fully explain. Claire felt drawn to him. Maybe it was because he reminded her of a simpler time in her life before responsibilities and expectations consumed her. Or maybe it was because, deep down, she longed for someone who could remind her what it meant to truly live. Whatever the reason, she couldn't stop thinking about him. Over the next few days, Claire debated whether to reach out. Should she message him, thank him again for the coffee? Or would that come across as strange, even intrusive? After all, they were practically strangers. Still, the idea of reconnecting lingered in her mind, refusing to fade away. One morning, as she sipped her tea and stared out the window of her high-rise apartment, Claire made a decision. She wouldn't overthink it. She'd let fate take its course. If their paths crossed again, she'd seize the opportunity. And if they didn't, well, she'd have to accept that some encounters are meant to remain fleeting, little did Claire. No, fate had other plans. Just a week later, she found herself standing in line at the same coffee shop, waiting to order her usual cappuccino. As she glanced around the room, her heart skipped a beat. There he was, Ethan, sitting by the window with his laptop open, completely engrossed in whatever he was working on. Claire hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Then, summoning her courage, she approached him. "Hey," she said softly, trying not to startle him. "Do you mind if I join you?" Ethan looked up, surprise flickering across his face before breaking into a warm smile. "Of course not. Grab a seat." As Claire settled into the chair across from him, she felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This was her chance to get to know him better, and perhaps to let him get to know her too. Over the next hour, they talked about everything and nothing. Ethan shared stories about his projects, his love for teaching, and his passion for creating art that resonated with people. Claire listened intently, marveling at how effortlessly he spoke about his dreams and aspirations. In turn, she opened up about her own interests, though she carefully avoided mentioning her job or financial status. Instead, she focused on the things that brought her joy: reading historical novels, exploring museums, and taking long walks through the city. For the first time in ages, Claire felt comfortable being herself, free from the pressure of maintaining a perfect image. By the time they parted ways, both of them knew something special had happened. Their conversation had sparked a connection neither of them expected, one that went beyond casual acquaintance. As Claire walked back to her office, she couldn't help but smile. Maybe, just maybe, meeting Ethan wasn't just a coincidence. Maybe it was the beginning of something meaningful. The following weeks flew by in a blur of meetings, deadlines, and late-night brainstorming sessions. Yet, amidst the chaos, Claire made it a point to meet Ethan whenever she could. Sometimes it was at the coffee shop, other times at a nearby park or art gallery. Each encounter left her feeling lighter, as if a piece of the weight she carried had lifted. Ethan's presence was like a breath of fresh air, reminding her of the beauty and simplicity and the importance of human connection. But despite the growing bond between them, Claire couldn't shake the nagging fear in the back of her mind. What would happen if Ethan discovered the truth about her? Would he see her differently? Would their friendship survive the revelation of her wealth and status? These questions haunted her, casting a shadow over the happiness she felt whenever they were together. For now, though, Claire chose to set those worries aside. She wanted to enjoy the present, to cherish the moments they shared without letting fear dictate her actions. After all, life was unpredictable, and opportunities like this didn't come around often. Whatever the future held, she was determined to make the most of it, one cup of coffee at a time. Fate has a funny way of bringing people together, even when they least expect it. For Claire and Ethan, their chance encounters quickly turned into something more meaningful. It started with small gestures: Claire suggesting they try a new cafe downtown, or Ethan inviting her to check out an art exhibit he was participating in. Each meeting felt natural, like two old friends catching up rather than near strangers getting to know each other. One chilly Friday afternoon, Ethan walked into the coffee shop where they had first met. He wasn't surprised to see Claire already there, sitting by the window with her laptop open. She looked up as he approached, her face lighting up with a smile that made his day instantly better. "Hey," she said warmly. "Mind if I steal you away from work for a bit?" Ethan laughed, sliding into the chair across from her. "Steal me? I thought you'd never ask." They spent hours talking that day, sharing stories about their lives, their passions, and their quirks. Ethan told her about his childhood dream of becoming an artist, how he used to sketch superheroes on the back pages of notebooks during school. Claire listened intently, laughing at his anecdotes and marveling at how much joy he found in creating things. In return, she opened up about her love for books, especially historical fiction, which transported her to different worlds and times. But Claire held back certain parts of her story: the painful losses, the pressures of running a company, the loneliness she often felt despite being surrounded by people. She didn't want to burden him with those details yet. Instead, she focused on the lighter moments, the things that brought her happiness outside of work. Ethan noticed how animated she became when she talked about exploring museums or taking long walks through the city. There was a spark in her eyes, a side of her he hadn't seen before. Over the next few weeks, their meetings became a regular part of both their routines. Sometimes they'd grab coffee. Other times they'd wander through parks or visit local art galleries. Ethan introduced Claire to some of his favorite spots: a hidden bookstore tucked away in a quiet alley, a cozy diner famous for its homemade pies, and a mural-covered street where artists showcased their work. Claire, in turn, showed Ethan places she loved: a serene botanical garden, a rooftop cafe with breathtaking views of the city skyline, and a historic library filled with rare manuscripts. These outings weren't just about discovering new places, they were about discovering each other. With every conversation, they peeled back layers of their personalities, revealing pieces of themselves they rarely shared with others. Ethan learned that Claire was fiercely intelligent but also deeply empathetic, always asking thoughtful questions and genuinely caring about his answers. Claire realized that Ethan's easygoing nature masked a sharp mind and a strong sense of purpose. Beneath his laid-back exterior was someone who cared deeply about making a difference, whether through his art or his interactions with people. Despite their growing bond, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that she was keeping a secret too big to ignore. Every time Ethan mentioned his struggles paying rent, juggling freelance gigs, teaching classes to make ends meet, she felt a pang of guilt. Here she was, sitting across from him, someone who worked hard for everything he had, while she lived a life of privilege most people could only dream of. The disparity between their worlds weighed heavily on her. Even though she knew Ethan would never judge her for it, still, she couldn't bring herself to tell him the truth. What if he saw her differently? What if he thought she was using him? Or worse, trying to impress him? The fear of losing what they had kept her silent, even as the guilt gnawed at her. One evening, after a particularly fun day exploring the city, Ethan invited Claire to join him at a charity gala happening the following weekend. "It's not really my scene," he admitted, scratching the back of his neck nervously. "But my artwork is being auctioned off, and it'd mean a lot if you came." Claire hesitated. Charity galas were exactly her scene, events filled with influential people, expensive suits, and conversations about investments and networking. They were part of her world, a world she had deliberately kept hidden from Ethan. Attending the gala would risk exposing her secret, but saying no felt wrong. 2. How could she turn down an invitation that clearly meant so much to him? "I'll be there," she said finally, forcing a smile. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The night of the gala arrived sooner than Claire expected. Dressed in an elegant gown, she stepped into the grand ballroom, feeling out of place among the sea of familiar faces. As she scanned the crowd, she spotted Ethan near the entrance, looking dapper in a suit that seemed slightly too formal for his usual style. When he saw her, his face lit up. "You look amazing," he said, offering her a glass of champagne. "So do you," Claire replied, meaning it. Despite his discomfort with the setting, Ethan carried himself with quiet confidence. Watching him mingle with guests and talk passionately about his art filled her with pride. This was the real him, the kind, talented man she had come to admire, and seeing him shine in this environment only deepened her affection for him, but fate had other plans. As the evening wore on, Claire found herself cornered by a group of executives who recognized her immediately. "Miss Bennet!" One of them exclaimed loudly, drawing attention from nearby guests. "What brings you here tonight?" Claire froze, her heart sinking as all eyes turned toward her. Ethan, standing just a few feet away, looked confused. "Wait, Bennet?" he murmured, piecing things together. His expression shifted from surprise to hurt, then to confusion. Before Claire could explain, he pulled her aside, his voice low but tense. "Care to tell me why everyone here knows who you are except me?" Claire's stomach churned. She had dreaded this moment, knowing it would come eventually. Now that it was here, she didn't know where to start. "I wanted to tell you," she began, her voice trembling. "But I was scared. Scared you'd see me differently, scared I'd lose this us?" Ethan stared at her, processing her words. So what? You're some big-shot CEO? Is that why you've been holding back? It's not like that, Claire insisted, tears welling up in her eyes. Yes, I run a company. But that's not who I am, not really. Not the person you've gotten to know these past few weeks. Ethan took a step back, running a hand through his hair. This is a lot to take in, he admitted. I thought we were being honest with each other. Turns out I don't even know who you are. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Claire tried to apologize, to explain further, but Ethan needed space. By the end of the evening, they parted ways without resolving anything. Walking home alone, Claire felt a heaviness settle over her chest. She had ruined everything, or so she thought. As the days went by, Ethan wrestled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he felt betrayed. Why hadn't Claire trusted him enough to share the truth? On the other hand, he understood her fears. He had seen glimpses of her vulnerability during their time together and knew she wasn't the type to flaunt her wealth or status. Still, the secrecy stung. Meanwhile, Claire struggled with guilt and regret. She replayed their conversations in her head, wondering if she could have handled things differently. She missed Ethan more than she cared to admit, missing not just his presence but the connection they had built. Determined to make amends, she decided to confront the issue head-on. One rainy afternoon, Claire showed up at Ethan's apartment, umbrella in hand and nerves on edge. Knocking softly on the door, she braced herself for whatever reaction awaited her. When Ethan opened the door, his expression softened slightly, though traces of hurt lingered in his eyes. "I'm sorry," Claire said immediately, her voice breaking. "Not just for lying, but for letting fear control me. You deserve better than that." Ethan sighed, stepping aside to let her in. "Let's talk." For hours they sat together, hashing out their feelings. Claire explained her past, the loss of her parents, the collapse of her family's business, the sacrifices she made to build her company from scratch. She spoke openly about the isolation and pressure that came with success, admitting how much she valued the simplicity and authenticity Ethan brought into her life. Ethan listened quietly, absorbing her words. When it was his turn to speak, he shared his own struggles: financial instability, self-doubt, and the constant battle to balance creativity with practicality. Through their conversation, they realized that while their circumstances were different, their desires were the same: to find meaning, connection, and fulfillment in a chaotic world. By the time the rain stopped outside, something had shifted between them. The walls they had built around themselves began to crumble, replaced by a deeper understanding and acceptance. They weren't perfect, and neither was their relationship, but maybe that was okay. Maybe love wasn't about finding someone flawless. It was about embracing imperfections and building something real together. As Claire left that evening, Ethan called after her. "Hey," he said with a faint smile, "thanks for coming by, and thanks for trusting me enough to tell me the truth." Claire smiled back, relief washing over her. "Thank you for listening. That means more than you know." Walking home. Under the clearing skies, Claire felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't facing them alone anymore. The days following the charity gala were some of the hardest Ethan had ever faced. He couldn't stop replaying the events of that night in his mind: the shock, the hurt, the confusion. It wasn't just about Claire lying to him. It was about feeling like he didn't really know her at all. For weeks, they had built this connection, laughing together, sharing stories, and opening up about their lives. Or so he thought. Now, everything felt uncertain. Every time Ethan tried to focus on his work, his thoughts drifted back to Claire. Was she truly the person he believed her to be? Had their friendship been genuine, or was it tainted by secrets? The questions swirled endlessly in his head, leaving him restless and frustrated. At the same time, he couldn't deny the memories of how kind she had been, how much joy her presence brought into his life. That part of her hadn't changed. Even if the truth about her identity had blindsided him, Claire, on the other hand, was drowning in guilt. She spent hours replaying their conversations, wondering where she went wrong. Why hadn't she trusted Ethan enough to tell him the truth earlier? What must he think of her now? Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Did he hate her? Would he cut her out of his life completely? The uncertainty was unbearable, but deep down, she knew she had to fix things. If there was any chance of salvaging what they had, she needed to act fast. One rainy afternoon, Claire gathered her courage and showed up at Ethan's apartment. Standing outside his door, umbrella dripping water onto the floor, she hesitated. For a moment, what if he turned her away? What if he refused to listen? Taking a deep breath, she knocked softly. When Ethan opened the door, his expression was guarded. His eyes widened slightly in surprise, but there was no warmth in his gaze. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone neutral. "I came to apologize," Claire said quickly, her voice trembling. "I owe you an explanation." Ethan stepped aside, letting her in without saying another word. The silence between them was heavy as they sat down in his small living room. Rain pattered against the window, filling the awkward pause. "I'm sorry," Claire began, choosing her words carefully. "Not just for not telling you who I am, but for letting fear dictate my choices. I wanted to protect our friendship, our connection from being overshadowed by, well, everything else." Ethan leaned forward, his arms resting on his knees. "You should have told me," he said quietly. "I get why you were scared, but keeping something like that from me feels like a betrayal." Claire nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know. And I understand if you can't forgive me right away. But please believe me when I say this. The woman you've gotten to know these past few weeks isn't fake. She's real. She's me, the part of me that doesn't care about money or titles or success. That's who I want to be when I'm with you." For a long moment, Ethan didn't respond. He studied her face, searching for sincerity in her words. Finally, he sighed. "Why didn't you trust me?" "It's not about trust," Claire replied softly. "It's about vulnerability. My whole life, people have treated me differently because of who I am, or rather, what I represent. They see the CEO, the millionaire, the powerful figure, not the person behind all of that. You saw me as just me, and that terrified me, because I liked it. I liked how normal I felt around you. I didn't want to lose that." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, thinking over her words. He could hear the honesty in her voice, see the pain in her eyes. Slowly, the anger inside him began to fade, replaced by understanding. "Do you have any idea how lonely it is sometimes?" Claire continued, her voice breaking. "Running a company, making decisions that affect thousands of people, it's isolating. Everyone wants something from you. Everyone expects something from you. Then I met you, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Like I didn't have to pretend anymore." Ethan listened intently, realizing for the first time just how much pressure Claire carried on her shoulders. He had always admired her confidence and poise, never imagining the weight of responsibility she bore every single day. As she spoke, he started to see her in a new light, not just as the successful CEO everyone revered, but as a human being with fears, struggles, and dreams just like anyone else. "I guess I never really thought about it that way," Ethan admitted. "After a while? I mean, I knew your life was different from mine, but I didn't realize how hard it must be." "It's not glamorous," Claire said with a weak smile. "People see the fancy offices, the expensive clothes, the parties, but they don't see the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the loneliness. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it." Ethan nodded slowly, processing her words. Despite everything, he couldn't deny the bond they shared. Their connection wasn't built on lies. It was rooted in moments of laughter, curiosity, and mutual respect. Those feelings were real, even if the circumstances surrounding them weren't. "Perfect. So what happens now?" Ethan asked finally, looking at her. "That's up to you," Claire replied honestly. "If you want nothing to do with me, I'll understand. But if you're willing to give us another chance, I promise I'll do better. No more hiding, no more secrets." Ethan hesitated, weighing his options. Part of him still felt hurt, still questioned whether he could fully trust her again. But another part, a bigger part, knew that walking away would mean losing something special. Something rare. Something worth fighting for. Okay, he said finally, his voice steady. We'll take it slow. One step at a time. Relief washed over Claire's face, followed by gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. You won't regret this. As the rain outside began to ease, the tension between them lifted too. They talked for hours, sharing more pieces of themselves than they ever had before. Claire opened up about her childhood, the loss of her parents, and the struggle she faced rebuilding her life after tragedy struck. Ethan listened without judgment, offering comfort and support. In return, he shared his own insecurities, his fear of failure, his doubts about pursuing art full-time, and the pressure he felt to prove himself in a competitive world. By the end of the evening, both of them felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted off their shoulders. Forgiveness wasn't instant and trust wouldn't come overnight, but they were on the path to healing, together. Over the next few weeks, Claire and Ethan worked to rebuild their relationship. They took things slow, focusing on honesty and transparency. Claire made a conscious effort to let Ethan into her world, inviting him to meetings, introducing him to colleagues, and showing him the reality of her daily life. Ethan, in turn, shared more about his passions, taking her to art studios, workshops, and exhibitions that inspired him. Through these experiences, they discovered new layers of each other. Claire marveled at Ethan's creativity, watching him sketch ideas on napkins or explain the symbolism behind his paintings. Ethan admired Claire's resilience, seeing firsthand how she navigated challenges with grace and determination. They learned to appreciate their differences, finding strength in the balance they created together. But perhaps the most important lesson they both learned was that love wasn't about perfection. It was about embracing imperfections, supporting each other through ups and downs, and choosing to stand by one another despite mistakes and misunderstandings. Claire and Ethan weren't just two individuals anymore, they were a team, united by trust, respect, and a shared desire to grow. As they stood side by side one evening, gazing at the city skyline from Claire's penthouse balcony, Ethan smiled. You know, he said lightly, for someone who runs a multi-million-dollar company, you sure do make a mean cup of coffee. Claire laughed, nudging him playfully. And for someone who claims to be broke, you sure know how to brighten someone's day. They laughed together, the sound echoing softly in the cool night air. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew one thing for certain: they'd face them together. After all, sometimes the best stories are the ones that start with a simple act of kindness and grow into something extraordinary. Rebuilding trust isn't easy, especially when it's been shaken by secrets and misunderstandings. For Claire and Ethan, the road ahead wasn't smooth. It was bumpy, unpredictable, and filled with moments of doubt. But they were determined to make it work. Each day became a step forward, even if those steps sometimes felt small or uncertain. At first, their interactions were cautious. Claire worried about saying the wrong thing, while Ethan struggled to shake off lingering feelings of betrayal. They both knew that forgiveness didn't happen overnight, but they also understood that healing required effort from both sides. So they started slow, focusing on honesty and transparency in every conversation. One evening, as they sat together in Ethan's cozy apartment, Claire decided to share more about her past, things she had never told anyone before. She spoke softly, her voice tinged with emotion, as she recounted the pain of losing her parents in a car accident when she was just 22. It felt like my entire world collapsed, she admitted, staring at her hands. They weren't just my family, they were my best friends, my mentors. Losing them left me completely lost. Ethan listened quietly, his heart aching for her. He could see how much it cost her to relive those memories, and he admired her courage for opening up. What happened after that? He asked gently, encouraging her to continue. Claire took a deep breath before continuing. Their business went under because I didn't know how to keep it running. We lost everything, the house, the cars, our savings. It was humiliating, but it also taught me something important. If I wanted to survive, I had to fight. Her eyes grew distant as she described the long nights spent studying, The endless rejections she faced early in her career and the sacrifices she made to build her company from scratch. For years, success was all I cared about. It was my way of proving to myself and maybe to them that their deaths weren't in vain. Ethan nodded, absorbing her words. That must have taken so much strength, he said sincerely. I can't imagine going through something like that. It did take strength, Claire replied with a faint smile. But it also came with a price. Success doesn't fill the void. At least not for me. All the money, the titles, the recognition, they mean nothing if you don't have someone to share it with. Her vulnerability struck a chord in Ethan. He realized how lonely her life must have been, despite the outward appearance of glamour and achievement. In that moment, he felt grateful for the opportunity to be part of her journey, not as an admirer of her success, but as someone who truly saw her for who she was. In return, Ethan opened up about his own struggles. He talked about growing up in a modest household where creativity was often seen as impractical compared to real jobs. His parents encouraged him to pursue stability over passion, which led to years of internal conflict. I've always loved art, he explained, gesturing toward the sketches scattered across his desk. But there were times when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was wasting my time chasing something that might never pay off. Claire listened intently, nodding along. Do your parents still feel that way? Not as much anymore, Ethan said with a shrug. They've come around since I started getting steady clients. But it's hard, balancing what you love with what pays the bills. Sometimes it feels like I'm living two separate lives. You're not alone in that, Claire said softly. I think we all carry parts of ourselves that we wish we could leave behind. The trick is finding someone who accepts all those pieces, even the messy ones. Their conversation stretched late into the night, weaving between laughter and tears, vulnerability and hope. By the time they finally called it a night, both of them felt lighter, as though sharing their burdens had lifted some of the weight they carried individually over the next few weeks. Claire and Ethan worked hard to strengthen their bond. Claire began involving Ethan in aspects of her life that she had previously kept hidden. She invited him to board meetings, introduced him to colleagues, and even brought him along to charity events hosted by her company. At first, Ethan felt out of place among the polished executives and high-profile guests, but Claire reassured him. You belong here, she told him one evening as they stood on the rooftop of a luxury hotel overlooking the city lights. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Ethan smiled, touched by her words. Still, he couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between their worlds. While Claire moved effortlessly through glitzy galas and corporate conferences, Ethan thrived in quieter spaces, art studios, coffee shops, and parks. Their differences occasionally created friction, but instead of letting it drive them apart, they used it as an opportunity to learn from each other. Claire admired Ethan's ability to find beauty in simplicity. Whether it was sketching strangers on park benches or turning discarded scraps of paper into intricate designs, he reminded her to appreciate the little things. In turn, Ethan marveled at Claire's resilience and determination. Watching her navigate complex negotiations and lead her team with confidence inspired him to push past his own self-doubt. One afternoon, while walking through a bustling market, Ethan stopped suddenly in front of a stall selling handmade jewelry. Picking up a delicate silver bracelet, he turned to Claire. This reminds me of you, he said, holding it up. Simple, elegant, but full of character, Claire laughed, touched by the gesture. You don't need expensive gifts to impress me, she teased. Besides, I already have everything I want. What's that? Ethan asked, raising an eyebrow. You, she replied simply, her tone serious. Just you. The sincerity in her voice caught Ethan off guard. For a moment, he forgot about the crowd around them, the noise of the market fading into the background. All that mattered was the woman standing in front of him, the woman who had fought so hard to rebuild what they had almost lost. As the months passed, their relationship deepened in ways neither of them expected. They learned to lean on each other during tough times, offering support and encouragement when needed most. When Ethan landed a major client for his design business, Claire celebrated his success as if it were her own. And when Claire faced challenges at work, a failed product launch, or a difficult decision, Ethan was there to remind her of her strengths and help her stay grounded. Through it all, they discovered that love wasn't about erasing differences or pretending to be perfect. It was about embracing imperfections, supporting each other through ups and downs, and choosing to stand by one another no matter what. Their connection wasn't flawless, but it was real, and that made it worth fighting for. One spring morning, as they strolled through a botanical garden filled with blooming flowers and chirping birds, Claire paused to take in the scenery. Turning to Ethan, she smiled. "Do you remember the first time we met?" Ethan chuckled, nodding. "How could I forget? You forgot your wallet and I paid for your coffee." "And look at us now," Claire said, her voice soft but full of gratitude. "Who would have thought a cup of coffee could change everything?" Ethan reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Maybe it wasn't just the coffee," he said with a grin. "Maybe it was fate giving us a second chance." Claire laughed, leaning into him. "Or maybe it was just good timing." Whatever it was, they were grateful. Grateful for the mistakes that taught them humility, the struggles that brought them closer, and the love that continued to grow stronger with each passing day. As they walked hand in hand beneath the sunlit trees, they knew one thing for certain: their story was far from over, but together they were ready to face whatever came next. Months had passed since that rainy afternoon when Claire showed up at Ethan's apartment, ready to face the truth and rebuild what they almost lost. Their relationship wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was stronger than ever. The cracks from their past misunderstandings hadn't disappeared entirely, but they had become part of the foundation, reminders of how far they'd come. Together, they were learning to navigate life not as two separate individuals, but as a team. Claire had made changes in her life, two changes she never thought possible before meeting Ethan. For years, her schedule had been packed with meetings, calls, and endless responsibilities. Her days blurred together, leaving little room for anything outside of work. But now, she found herself carving out time for things that mattered most. Quiet mornings sipping coffee, long walks through the city, and evenings spent laughing with Ethan over takeout food. She started delegating tasks at work, trusting her team to handle projects without micromanaging every detail. It wasn't easy letting go of control, but it gave her space to breathe, to live. Ethan noticed the shift in her immediately. The tense lines around her eyes softened, and there was a lightness in her step that hadn't been there before. He loved seeing this side of her, the version of Claire who laughed freely, danced awkwardly in her kitchen while cooking dinner, and got excited about silly things like spotting a rare bird during their hikes. This was the real Claire, the one he had fallen for, not the polished CEO everyone else saw. For Ethan, life felt fuller too. His freelance design business was thriving, thanks in part to Claire's encouragement and connections. She introduced him to people in her network who appreciated his talent and hired him for high-profile projects. At first, Ethan worried about accepting help from her, fearing it might feel like charity, but Claire reassured him. "You earned this," she said firmly. "Your work speaks for itself." With newfound confidence, Ethan began taking bigger risks in his career. He rented a small studio space downtown where he could focus on creating larger pieces for exhibitions. Some nights, Claire would visit him there, sitting quietly as he worked, offering feedback or simply keeping him company. Watching him pour his heart into his art reminded her why she fell in love with him in the first place: his passion, his creativity, his ability to see beauty in the ordinary. Their differences still surfaced occasionally, but instead of causing tension, they became opportunities to grow. Claire often teased Ethan about his habit of turning random objects into art supplies. "Do you really need to save that old shoe?" While Ethan playfully mocked her obsession with organizing everything in color-coded folders. These light-hearted moments balanced out the heavier ones, reminding them that relationships weren't just about overcoming challenges, they were also about enjoying the journey. One spring evening, Ethan surprised Claire by inviting her back to the coffee shop where they first met. The place looked exactly the same, cozy booths, mismatched chairs, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. As they sat down at a corner table, Claire raised an eyebrow. "What's the occasion?" Ethan grinned, pulling something out of his pocket. It was a small sketchbook, its cover worn and slightly stained from use. Flipping it open, he revealed page after page of drawing sketches of Claire captured in different moments throughout their time together. There she was, laughing over spilled sugar packets, sitting cross-legged on a park bench, engrossed in a book, gazing thoughtfully out a window, sunlight streaming across her face. "I've been working on this for months," Ethan explained, his voice tinged with nervousness. "It's my way of saying thank you for trusting me, for being patient with me, for showing me what it means to truly live." Tears welled up in Claire's eyes as she flipped through the pages. Each drawing was more beautiful than the last, capturing not just her appearance but her essence, her warmth, her strength, her vulnerability. "This is incredible," she whispered, unable to find words that did justice to how much it meant. To her, Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You changed my life, you know. Before I met you, I was stuck afraid to take risks, afraid to believe in myself. But you showed me that it's okay to be imperfect, to make mistakes, to try again even when things don't go as planned." Claire smiled, squeezing his hand tightly. "And you reminded me what it feels like to be human, to laugh, to cry, to connect. You saved me, Ethan, in ways I didn't even realize I needed saving." They sat there for a while, holding hands, and reminiscing about the twists and turns that led them to this moment. Neither of them could have predicted how their lives would intertwine. A chance encounter over coffee blossoming into something so profound. But here they were, two imperfect souls finding solace, love, and redemption in each other. As the seasons changed, so did their dreams. Claire decided to dedicate more time to mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing the lessons she learned along the way. She wanted to give back, to inspire others the way Ethan had inspired her. Meanwhile, Ethan dreamed bigger than ever before, planning his first solo art exhibition. With Claire's support, he poured his heart into the project, determined to create something meaningful, not just for himself, but for the woman who believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. On the opening night of the exhibition, Claire stood proudly beside Ethan as guests admired his work. The centerpiece of the show was a large mural titled "Fractured Light." It depicted shards of glass scattering outward, refracting beams of color in unexpected directions. To Ethan, it symbolized resilience, the idea that even broken pieces can create something beautiful when put together with care. When Claire asked him about the title, Ethan smiled. "It's us," he said simply. "Broken in our own ways, but stronger because we found each other." By the end of the evening, the gallery buzzed with praise, but Ethan barely noticed. All he cared about was the woman standing next to him. Her arm linked with his, her presence grounding him. For the first time in his life, he felt truly fulfilled, not because of success or recognition, but because he had someone who understood him completely. Later that night, as they walked home, under a starlit sky, Claire leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder. "Do you think we'll always be like this?" she asked softly. "Happy, I mean," Ethan chuckled, wrapping an arm around her. "I don't know about always happy. Life's too unpredictable for that. But I do know one thing, we'll always have each other, and that's enough." Claire nodded, content with his answer. They didn't need grand promises or fairy tale endings. What they had was real, raw, and rooted in trust. Together they had faced secrets, doubts, and fears and emerged stronger on the other side. As they reached Claire's penthouse apartment, Ethan paused to look out at the glittering city skyline. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "for someone who runs a multi-million-dollar company, you sure do make a mean cup of coffee." Claire laughed, nudging him playfully. "And for someone who claims to be broke, you sure know how to brighten someone's day." Their laughter echoed softly in the cool night air, a reminder of how far they'd come and how much further they had yet to go. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew they'd face them together. Because in the end, their story wasn't just about a CEO and a graphic designer finding love. It was about two people choosing to embrace imperfections, cherish connections, and build something extraordinary out of the ordinary. And sometimes, all it takes is a simple act of kindness, a cup of coffee paid for on a chilly Tuesday morning to set the wheels of fate in motion.